the real goal of the series. Pause. I must have ADD tonight. My name is Paul Watson. I am the young adult pastor and the Wednesday night teacher for those of you guys that are normally not here on Wednesday nights. But we're in this series. It's called God's Protege. Tonight we're talking about giving. And here's what I believe. I believe that there are things that we can do that draws us closer to God. And this whole study has been about this teaching that Jesus did. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And basically what Jesus did is he went and he sat on this hill and he just started teaching people. And he just went through all these things. And tonight we're going to talk about giving. I want you to think about, and I want you to talk to your neighbor for just a second, and I want you to think about the best gift you have ever received. What is that? What is the very best gift that you've ever received? If you sat here and thought about it for just a second, what would that be? Tell your neighbor the very best gift you've ever received. Very best gift you've ever received. Have you ever thought about that? I think my favorite gift that I've ever received, my wife, I came home one day, and as I came home, she stopped me at the door and said, sorry, you can't come in. You can't come in. And my kids were sitting there, and they were excited, and I could see that something was going on, but I didn't know what it was. And so my daughter comes up with this great idea. Okay, wait, you can't come in unless we can blindfold you. And I was like, okay, whatever. I just want to come in. It's my house. So my daughter ran in and she got this towel, she wrapped it around my head, and they pulled me into the house. They set me down on the couch, and as I sat on the couch, they set this thing in my lap. And I took off the blindfold, and I began to unwrap this sword. And I had just finished reading a book. And at the end of this book, this guy had written this book. His wife gave him a sword. And it just simply said, to the defender of our family and our faith. I've got that sword. It sits in my office. If you ever want to come in for counseling, we could use that sword. It's really awesome. It's a cool thing. That's probably my favorite gift that I've ever been given. Now I want you to think for just a second about the best gift you've ever given. What's the best gift you've ever given? Can you pinpoint it? Tell your neighbor, the very best gift you've ever given someone. What was it? Are you a good gift giver? My sister, Rachel, every time Christmas comes around, we do this family exchange thing. And everybody wants to get gifts from my sister, Rachel, because my sister, Rachel, gives amazing gifts. I think probably my favorite gift that I've ever given, and I can't say that I'm an amazing gift giver, but my favorite gift that I've ever given someone was to my wife. And it was her engagement ring. And the reason that's my favorite gift is because she didn't even see it coming. She had no idea that this thing was going to happen. And what I did is I stuck it in this pizza box. Showed up with the pizza, said, hey, what are you doing? Let's grab some pizza. And showed up with this pizza box, and we're hanging out. And I'm like, hey, why don't you get me a slice of pizza, and I'll get us some drinks. And she opens up the box of pizza, and there was her engagement ring. And what I loved about it, okay, girls, go ahead, go, ah. And that was what I loved about it right there, was that when my wife got her engagement ring, she did that. She went, ah. And you gave a good gift. There is nothing like watching somebody light up when you give a good gift, right? There's nothing like Christmas. Christmas morning, it's great to get gifts, but I love watching my kids' face when they receive a gift. When they receive not just a gift, not just like pants, or not just like socks, you know what I'm saying? But when they receive like that gift of like the brand new snowboard, and they're just like, they know you love them because they got a good gift, right? And so some of you guys right now are making your Christmas list. Yeah, snowboard. And you're thinking, I want good gifts. And this is what Jesus did. Jesus is sitting on this hillside, and he starts talking to this crowd. And he starts talking about giving good gifts and about giving gifts. And it's really cool what he says. And so if you have your Bibles, you can flip over to Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. It's not a big paragraph. It's not this big passage. It's actually quite simple. And if you have your notes, what you can do is that we've set your notes up in such a way that you have 5 points. We do that a lot around here. And the reason we do that is this. There's times when we don't, but we try and be purposeful in that. And the reason we do that is so that you can take that first point that we're going to go through in just a minute, and tomorrow morning that would be your devotion. We want to make it very easy for you to come to know God and come to know His ways and walk in His ways. So tomorrow morning when you wake up, you'll take that first point and you'll take those 2 scriptures that are on that first point and you'll apply it to your life. And you'll begin to think, am I doing these things? And that's how we've got our notes set up. So hopefully you'll be taking notes tonight. But so Jesus is sitting on this hillside and He begins to say this. He says, take care. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be noticed, to be admired, because then you will lose your reward. I want you to catch this. This is a freebie. This is not necessarily in my talk. It'll be in there a little bit. But this is a freebie. When He says, do not do your good deeds publicly to be admired, because then you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven, what He's really saying is that God has good rewards for people who do good deeds for other people. As Christians, we do not get to heaven by doing good deeds. But Jesus is saying, hey, you know what happens? When God looks down at you and He sees that you're doing good stuff, that makes Him light up like a father. And He wants to reward you, and there's good things coming for you. Don't do them to be admired by people, because God's got good stuff for you. And then He goes on, and He says this. When you give to someone in need, don't shout about it, as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogue and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I assure you, they have received all the reward they will ever get. Here's what He's saying in that. The word hypocrite, the very same word that we use, hypocrite, is a Greek word. The meaning has changed, but the meaning has changed, but it is written exactly the same way that the Greeks wrote it. It's hypocrite. But what it means for us and what it means for the Greeks is just a little bit different. See, hypocrite meant a person who was an actor. They would say that a person who was on stage was a hypocrite. And the reason that they would call that person a hypocrite is because that person would wear a mask. And so the word hypocrite in the Greek meaning just simply means this: a person who wears a false mask. And what Jesus is saying is He's saying, when you give your gifts, don't do them with a false mask on your face. Don't be like the hypocrites who are drawing attention to themselves, the people who are acting. Don't be as an actor on the stage. Give them with a gift that comes from the heart, that is from God. And so then He goes on to say this. He says, but when you give to someone, don't tell your left hand what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in secret, and your Father who knows all secrets. That's kind of a scary passage right there. Your Father in heaven who knows all secrets. Do you have any secrets? Yeah, we all do. And He knows them. And He loves you just the same. Will reward you. So here's what's going on. The religious leaders of the day, they would go up, they would find somebody who had a need. We've all done that, right? They would go find somebody who had a need, and when they would find that person, what they would do is they would bring this entourage with them, and their entourage would blow these trumpets, and then they would give the gifts so that everybody around could see. And Jesus was saying, don't be like the hypocrites. Don't draw attention to yourself when you give good gifts. And so here's the very first thing that I want you to write down if you're taking notes, is I believe that good deeds don't necessarily make good people. that just because you do a good deed, that does not mean you are a good person. Matthew 6:1, don't do your good deeds to be admired. Matthew 6:21 says it this way. It says, not all people who sound religious are really godly. Here's what I mean by not necessarily people who do good deeds are good people. Every now and then, my wife and I will get these calls. And the calls go something like this, and maybe you've gotten them too. Hey, Mr. Watson, you would not believe it. You have been chosen out of like 10,000 people to receive this 52-inch TV. And I'm like, hey, that's great. What do I got to do? You do not have to do anything except sign that credit card we sent you in the mail. Right? Some of you guys are like, yeah, I want that guy to call my house. If he could call my house, I could use that right now. And not all people that do good deeds are good people, because you and I both have had moments and times where we have done deeds that were good, but they were not done with a right heart. Right? Yeah, I'll do the dishes. Wham! Or you look at your wife and you're like, yeah, I'll go mow the lawn because I love you. But the Broncos are on. And we do these things and we take these attitudes. Or maybe we do it in such a way that we want people to see our good deeds. And Jesus was saying, don't do that. It is not in the deed. It's in the heart. You can go and feed all the homeless people you want to. And if you don't care about them, it does not matter. You can pray for people hours upon hours and upon hours. And if you don't love them, it does not matter. I've really begun to see that the adage is true. If it's too good to be true, then it's too good to be true. There's something I really love about our church. I don't know if you attend Canyon View Vineyard Church on a regular basis, but there's something that I really love about this church. We do this thing, and it's called servant evangelism. And maybe you've got to participate in some of our projects. But servant evangelism is just simply this, where we will take a group of people, we will go out to the city, and we will just do nice things for people just because. In about a month and a half, we will go give away 1,500 cups of hot chocolate at the Christmas, what do they call that? Parade of Lights. We'll give away 1,500 cups of hot chocolate in about 30 minutes. It's equivalent to about 52 gallons of hot chocolate. And it'll go in about 30 minutes. And it's really funny because as we're out there giving away hot chocolate, people will turn around and they'll say, hey, can I give you some money? No. And they're like, why are you doing this? And you just turn to them and you say, hey, you know what? We just believe that it's about time that Christians just start doing nice things for people just to be nice. And they'll turn and they'll just go, what? Really? I can remember one particular time when we were out doing servant evangelism and we gave a lady some corn, and she literally just started crying. And she said, why are you doing this? And I told her exactly what I just said. And she started crying and she said, you know what? I was just in my room praying that God would send somebody with food to our house. This is a sign that God loves me. And that you just go out and you just do things to be nice. On Friday nights, they'll go out to Canyon View or to the park, to Canyon View Park. You'll go to Canyon View Park or to Stoker Stadium. And they'll give away approximately 500 hot dogs in one night. And you're just doing things to be nice. The other night, they gave away 2,000 things of Rockstar drink. 1 Peter 2:15 says, for it is God's will that by doing good, you would silence the ignorant talk of foolish men. You see, there's a lot of people right now that they really believe that Christianity is just a thing. And that Christians don't really love people. And you see, here's what I believe. I believe that this is the way that we silence that kind of talk. That you do things for people because you love them and you love God. You see, there's two reasons why we should be giving. There's two reasons why we should be reaching out. And the first one is just simply this. Because we are madly, deeply in love with God. Are you madly, deeply in love with God? You see, if you're madly, deeply in love with God, if it's really your desire to be a protege of God, that when you look, you say, God, I want my life to reflect after your life, then you've got to be a giver. Because Jesus, wherever he went, he gave. And when he didn't even have anything to give, he turns a couple of fish and some loaves of bread and feeds 5,000 people. Because Jesus was a giver. The second one is this. Is because as Christians, we should be madly, deeply in love with people. You see, we're called to love God's people. And I believe this. I believe that we're called to care for people who can't care for themselves. And this is what Jesus was saying as he's up on the sermon, as he's up on the hillside. He's saying, guys, we care for people who have needs. When you give a gift to someone in need, you need to catch this. He was not suggesting that we help people who have needs. He was assuming that because of what God has done in your life, you are going to help people with needs. This was an assumption. This was built in. This was automatic, that we care for people who have needs. And I'm going to challenge you all the time. I'm going to challenge you on a regular basis. That I'm going to challenge you to use your life to reach out to people. Man, we've got 1,000 ways for you to use your life to reach out to people. Tim is going to take 5 people to DYC this Saturday night. He needs 5 people to go to DYC. DYC is the Division of Youth Correction. Some of you guys are like, yeah, I stayed there for a month. Don't tell anybody. You don't have to tell anybody. It's jail for high school kids. And he goes out there about every 2 months just to do a service for these guys. If you are 21 years of age or older and you have a clean record, you can go with him. And guess what? You don't have to stay. You can say bye. You know? That there's another cool thing that we have going on. That we do this thing called SURFs, or we help with this thing called SURFs. It's a thing that was started to reach out to students at Mesa College who might find themselves drunk on a Friday night. And instead of letting them drive, they can call this phone number, and they can go and pick people up and give them rides home. And you get into some of the craziest conversations with drunk people. Because all of a sudden, they're wide open, because their emotions are wide open, to hear things about God. And I believe this. I believe that God plants things in their hearts, and that when they wake up the next morning, there's times where it's just like, whoa, I was talking with somebody about Jesus. And then you get to contact them at Mesa State and say, hey, yeah, you're that person that gave me the ride. And it's not out of any other reason but to say, you know what, we love you. And we want you to come to know God. We want you to be drawn closer to Christ. That we find people with needs. Do you know who has needs? Everyone. You see, sometimes we're waiting, we're like, okay, when I graduate from school, I'm going to go on a mission trip. Or when my kids are older, I'm going to go do this for Jesus. And we're waiting to put our life in the right place to help people with their needs. Man, we are around needy people all day long. Do you know how I know that? Because I am so needy. I am so needy. I don't know about you, but there's so many times where I come walking through the door and I'm just like, oh, sweetheart, you would not believe my day. Man, because I know that if I'm needy, and I don't think I'm weird, I know that you're needy. And some of you guys are needier than other people because you call me. It's okay, you can. That's what we're in the job for. But everyone has needs. And when Christians turn and say, what can I do for you? It changes people's lives. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible, and as we've been going through this study, this thing has hit me like a ton of rocks, is just James 1:27. It's in your notes. And then it just says this. It says, true and lasting religion in the sight of God our Father. Catch this. True and lasting religion in the sight of God our Father means that we care. You can stop right there and we could be done with the whole thing. That we care. But that's not what it says. It says that we care for orphans and widows in their troubles, and that we refuse to let the world corrupt us. You see, as Christians, guys, we've got to refuse to let the world corrupt us. I want you to take a test right now. I want you to take a mental test. You can write it on your piece of paper if you want to. But I want you to answer this question. Write down what you are doing to help people. Write down what you're doing to help people. And I'm not doing it to convict you. Yeah, actually I am. I really hope that does. Because you see, I'm not doing it as a guilt trip. Let me say it that way. I'm not doing it as a guilt trip. But I believe that Christians are the hope of the world. I don't believe that Christianity is just another religion. I believe that Christians are the hope of the world. And that when we take what God has done in our lives and we use that to reach people who have needs, that they find Christ and they find hope in their life. And see, I believe that when I want God to look into my life and I want Him to be able to say, man, true and lasting religion in the sight of God our Father means that we care. And we care for orphans and widows. And what it's really saying is this. Is it saying orphans and widows? Yes. But it's also just saying people who have no one to care for them. And I believe that that is all kinds of people. I believe that that's people in the office. I believe that that's people at Mesa State College. I believe that that's the lady at the gas station and the woman that's taking your order for dinner. Because the greatest need in America is not a financial need like it is in many other countries. The greatest need in America is spiritual and emotional poverty. And that even right here in this room, as I say that, there is this thing that is going off in some of you guys going, yeah, man. I mean, I may not be struggling with money, but man, I just am so bankrupt emotionally. I just wish one person cared about me. If I just knew that one person cared about me, my life would be okay. You see, what we do is this. The reason I asked you to write that down is because we make excuses. We have fallen prey to the last part of that scripture. We have let the world corrupt us. We have taken our eyes off the things that are important, and we have placed our eyes on the things that really, at the end of your life, really don't matter. You know what? When you stand before God, He's not going to ask if you got your MBA. He's not going to ask if you got your degree. He's not going to ask how much money you made. He's going to ask, did you come to know my Son? And what did you do with those gifts that I gave you? Because the gifts that I gave you to use to help people. You see, when we flip back this whole God's protege thing, we started off with, we are the salt of the earth. We are the city on a hill. We are the light of the world. Psalms 22:24 says, for He has not ignored the suffering of the needy. He has not turned and walked away. He has listened to their cries for help. Here's what I believe that means. When it says that He has not ignored the suffering of the needy, I believe that is the cue for every person that declares that they want to be a protege of Christ to rise up. That's the Christian cue. When we see people suffering, that Christians would rise up and they would help people. They would be the hands and feet that minister to people. They would be the voices that speak into people and point them back into a life that walks towards Christ. That they would have a compassionate heart. That's our cue, guys. Point number 3. That the thing that God is impressed most with is God is impressed most with your heart, not your actions. You see, God is not impressed with people's actions. because he gave them the gifts. I do not think my favorite basketball player of all time is Michael Jordan. I loved watching Michael Jordan play. I know it's been years. I know there's some great ball players now. But when Michael Jordan was playing, every time he touched the ball, there was this huge chance that he was going to win the game. I loved watching it when they played the Jazz. He had 107 degree temperature, and he won game number 5 to win the championship with this little fadeaway shot that he kicked back. And the whole place went nuts. And you know what? I do not believe that God in heaven was going nuts. I do not believe that God was going, I wonder if he can make it. I believe that God was going, hey, I gave him the talent. He's only doing what I told him he could do. I believe that that's what God was doing. And that when God looks at us, he's not going, hey, that person did something really great. I was really surprised that they could do that. No, because he gave you the abilities to do that. What he's really impressed with is the person that chooses to do that. Because you know what else he gave you? He gave you free will. And so many of us exercise our free will on a daily basis when we turn our head and we walk away. But we have the other opportunity to use our free will to turn and say, I will honor God with my life. When my son was 3 years of age, some of you have not got to experience this yet, and others of you have really experienced this. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I was sitting down to pay my bills, and I had absolutely no money. We were really young. I think I was about 22 years of age. And we had no money. And he walks out and he says, hey, Dad, can we go to McDonald's? And I turned over to Brian and I said, Brian, we can't. And he said, why? And I said, well, we just can't. And he's 3. So he says, why? And I said, well, Brian, we just can't go to McDonald's. And he says, why? And I said, because we don't have any money. He said, we don't have any money for what? And I said, Brian, we don't have any money to pay our bills. And he goes, oh. And I'm thinking he's not getting it. I'm thinking this concept doesn't even make any sense to a 3-year-old. He's just going to go play trucks. So he turns and he walks into his bedroom. And he does. He goes and plays trucks for a little while. And then he comes back. And he said, hey, Dad, I found a quarter. Will this help? And I just went, I saved that quarter. I still have that quarter. Because you know what he was doing? He was saying, what can I do to help? What can I do? He was moved by his heart. And you see, if a 3-year-old gets moved by their heart, then how much more are we responsible to be moved by our heart? God is moved when our heart is moved. And when our heart is moved, it is moved because we want people to come to know Christ. We want people to walk in his ways. We want people to be changed by his power. It's not what we do that impresses God. It is why we do it. 1 Peter 2:12 says, live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits. I was talking with my dad today. This is a freebie. This is not in my notes. I was talking with my dad, and my dad gave his life to Christ when he was 36 years of age, 2 years before I was born. I am now 37. And he worked some terrible jobs, and he lived God. He lived a godly life through everything he did. And one day, he came to work, and this guy walks up to him and says, hey, Billy Joe, I saw your truck outside of the bar last night. My dad said, you didn't see my truck there. He says, no, I saw your truck. You drive that blue Ford, right? He said, yeah, I drive a blue Ford. He said, I saw your truck at the bar last night. He goes, no, dude, you didn't see my truck at the bar. He probably didn't say dude. He wasn't that cool. But he said, you didn't see my truck there. And the guy turns back to him and says, you're right. I didn't see your truck there. I've never seen your truck there. He said, you don't drink, do you? I said, no. He said, I've never heard you cuss either. Why not? He said, I gave my life to Christ a couple years ago. And he got to lead this guy to the Lord. And last night, hadn't seen this guy in 30 years. And he was at this church across town. And he walked by the front row. And there this man was 30 years later. Because why? Because 1 Peter 2:12 had taken place. Live such good lives among the pagans, though that they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God. You see, that's what we're called to do, guys. We are called to live good lives so that other people come to know Christ. The fourth thing I want you to write down is this. Don't let your needs keep you from meeting other people's needs. Don't let your needs keep you from meeting other people's needs. I'm imagining tonight that when you walked through those doors, I'm just taking a pop shot at this. I'm imagining some of you guys have walked through those doors with some pretty heavy baggage. Pretty heavy loads that you're carrying tonight. Man, I'm guessing that there's some stuff that if we really sat down and talked, I'm imagining that there would be stuff that you'd just say, man, Paul, you would not believe what's going on in my life. Man, I got this going on. And I got this going on. And you see, here's what happens. Satan wants to just load your pack so full that you can't focus upon anything but what's going on in your life. That you have such heavy burdens that you can barely make it through the day. And by carrying those burdens, you just go from moment to moment surviving. And if Satan can keep you in that mode, he knows that he can keep you from reaching people. And I'm saying release that tonight. That whatever you walk through the door for, man, tonight, give it back. Give it up. God's big enough to carry that. Matthew 6:3 says, but when you give to someone, you see, the key to Christianity is this. It's found in Acts chapter 2. And it just simply says that all the believers met together and they shared everything they had. And that if you can unload what's in your hands tonight, what happens is you free your hands up to be empty. And God can do amazing things with empty hands. You see, you're holding on to that thing. And that thing is causing you turmoil. It's causing you stress. You can't let it go. And by hanging on to it, God is not able to do through you what He wants to do through you. And when He does that through you, you're going to find that He begins to work in you. And so tonight, here's what I want you to do. Whatever is going on tonight, man, I want you, when we hit that last song, when we hit that worship song, that you just let it go. And you say, God, this is yours. I want to be free to be able to do whatever you need me to do. And I want you to do in me what you need to do in me so that you can do through me what you need to do through me. You see, I believe this. I believe that God wants to use each and every one of you. I believe that God didn't just die on the cross so that you could get saved. I believe that God died on the cross so that every single person that comes to know Christ can use their lives to reach other people, that they can give. You see, Matthew 6:32 and 33 says this. It says, your heavenly Father already knows your needs, and He will give you all you need from day to day if you live for Him and make His kingdom, the kingdom of God, your primary concern. So the last thing I wanted you to write down is just simply this. I'm going to ask the worship team to come back up. And as they come back up, I just want you to stay focused on what God's doing in your heart right now. You see, I believe the whole thing that God is doing, that when we talk about giving, and that when Jesus is sitting on the side of that hill, and He is engaging this crowd, and he's looking out at this crowd, and he's saying, here's how you live a life that honors God. He's saying this. He's saying, live your life to impress God and God alone. That when he's talking about, don't let your left hand see what your right hand is doing, and giving your gifts in secret, and your Father who knows all secrets will reward you. Here's what he's really saying. He's saying, live your life, guys, to impress God alone. He's not saying that everything you have to do, nobody has to know about. Because he went through the land and healed people. He went through the land and cast out demons. He went through the land and showed people the way to live a life that honors God. And he did it publicly. But what he's saying is this. Do you spend most of your time thinking about what other people think about you, or do you spend most of your time thinking about what God will think of you? Live your life to impress God and God alone. God alone. Mark 9:35 simply says this. Anyone who wants to be first must take last place and be the servant of everyone else. One of my favorite sayings is a saying from a priest named Francis of Assisi. And he just simply said this: preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. How are you living your life? What do you need? What do you need to let go of tonight? What do you need to give God? We're going to close out with one last worship song. As we finish this night out, here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. I'm going to challenge you that on this very last song, that you would just simply stand up and say, God, man, I want to be more like you tonight. I want to walk away from here and let go of the stuff that I'm holding on to and grab onto the stuff that you have for me. And then at the end of service, if you need prayer, we've got a prayer team. We hang out up front. And that whatever's going on in your life, all you have to do is come up. I believe there's a powerful thing that happens when two people pray for each other. Let's worship.
You're calling me to lay aside the worries of my day. My spirit worship yours. Open up my mouth and let a song of praise come forth. Worthy, you are worthy. Of a childlike faith and of my honest praise, of my unashamed love. child.